On the 15th of May 1957, they began testing the world's first intercontinental ballistic missile, an ICBM.
We were kept in such strict secrecy that we couldn't mention the word missile, even between ourselves. It was called the mechanism, the product. We called it our dear one. That romanticism, it helped us to live, to keep going.
Building missiles was just one step. The next would surprise the whole world. On October the 4th, 1957, Russia launched the world's first space satellite. They called it Sputnik, traveling companion to the Earth. Americans took for granted that theirs was the richest and most technically advanced nation in the world. With Sputnik now orbiting the Earth, all that changed. Russia had won the opening event of the space race. Everywhere, eyes and ears turned to the sky.
I did have a World War II surplus piece of equipment out in our garage that had been out there for some time unused. It was too heavy to bring into the house. So I powered that thing up and tuned one of the channels to just above 20 megahertz in frequency. And there faintly in the very distant background, among all the noise and other things, I could hear this little chirping sound, more like a cricket chirping than it was a beep, if you will. To me, it was the confirmation of the fact that the Russians had indeed put a satellite into orbit, and sitting there listening to that signal and watching the booster go overhead, you couldn't help but get goosebumps thinking about that thing.
Sputnik came as a shock overseas. The American military and others realized that the period when they were out of reach had ended. A new era had begun, when instead of a Sputnik, a nuclear weapon could not merely circle the Earth, but land where it was ordered to.
It had given our people quite a jolt, almost of panic proportions, to think that the Soviets could do that, and that meant they could hit the United States with missiles. Well, Eisenhower had been thinking about that for years, and this was no news to him.
Our satellite program has never been conducted as a race with other nations. Rather, it has been carefully scheduled as part of the scientific work of the International Geophysical Year. I consider our country's satellite program to be well designed and properly scheduled to achieve the scientific purposes for which it was initiated.
Eisenhower's critics charged that his lethargy had given away an advantage.
This government needs to start telling the truth to the American people. Quit kidding ourselves and quit trying to fool our friends and our neighbors. And by that I mean, let's find out just where we stand in this race and this armament picture, and let's find out just what we're going to do about it. Let's quit acting as if nothing happened, because something has happened, and it has embarrassed us throughout the world.
The world's mass media was choking with excitement that man had now entered into space. We would like to have had some rest. But one must give credit to Khrushchev. He realized that space victories could be of greater importance in politics than the threat of a club with a nuclear bomb on its end.
Within a month, Russia was ready with Sputnik 2. This time, it carried a passenger, Laika, the dog. American public opinion was split between fear of Soviet missiles and worries about the safety of the dog they called Curly.
We can only pray in this time of aloneness and suffering for Curly that God will be merciful and speed the end. This voiceless cry of mercy as this satellite spans the earth should be long remembered as a symbol of the torture the animal world must go through. And I don't mean to be facetious at all, but something to be remembered is that there's a female up there circling Mother Earth.
To catch up with the Russians, America pushed its own satellite project forward.
The Army and the Air Force were very eager to put up a satellite. Eisenhower was dubious about their proposals and decided to call on the Navy to produce a new satellite called the Vanguard to carry this out for peaceful civilian purposes only.
And so at the sunrise hour of the launching day, the U.S. scientists realize the world is watching and waiting. Success or failure will bring equal headlines. That is one price of greatness. And the Americans who sweat this one out at Cape Canaveral know their fledgling is on the spot. After rising but a few feet, the three-stage 72-foot rocket loses its thrust. The remarkable slow-motion films tell the rest of the story.
It was a national humiliation. The world's press had a field day. Something had to be done in a hurry to restore confidence in American technology. To the rescue came a former German rocket scientist, Werner von Braun. His team had been working on a military missile known as the Redstone. Hurriedly, the Explorer satellite was fitted to it. It worked. The race in space was between capitalism and communism, a competition the West feared Russia was winning. Russia was bursting with pride and celebrated its new scientific heroes. America, determined to catch up, turned to youth. Too few students had been taking science and engineering. Too many had followed softer courses. The National Defense Education Act was passed.
As a result, my ex-husband became an engineer, my brother became an engineer. Most of the people that I knew in my small environment went to become engineers. After they did that, they went into other things, but they were, we're all sort of conditioned to think we should definitely, this is what we need to do.
In 1959, Vice President Richard Nixon opened the American National Exhibition in Moscow. He tried to impress Khrushchev with America's advances in color television.
There are some instances where you may be ahead of us. For example, in the development of the thrust of your rockets for the investigation of outer space. There may be some instances, for example, color television, where we're ahead of you. But in order for both of us to benefit, you see, you never concede anything. Wait till you see the picture.
Khrushchev toured the United States, the first communist leader to be invited. In Hollywood, the stars turned out to entertain him. In the streets, people gave him a frostier welcome. The last few days of the visit he spent with Eisenhower at Camp David. Both said they were ready to slow down the arms race. It was difficult for Eisenhower to argue for restraint. The American people were convinced that the missile gap favored Russia. Ike was questioning how much of a gap there really was. U-2 spy planes had been searching for missiles. Few had been found.
We needed the information the U-2 was bringing back because the Russians were so secretive, the largest country in the world, with no tourists, no nothing. I mean, we needed some special means for finding out.
Pilot Gary Powers was selected for one of the longest and most dangerous spy missions ever flown. He would take off from Pakistan and fly north right across Russia. His route would take him over new and improved Soviet anti-aircraft defenses. As soon as the U-2 entered Soviet territory, Russian radar tracked its progress. MiG fighters were launched but couldn't climb high enough. The order was given to fire new S-75 missiles.
One missile was enough to shoot down the Powers plane. What we discovered first of all were the remains of the plane. And here they are behind me. The fuselage, wings,